And we are live. Today we have Shawnta Barnes, an educator, author, middle school dean right now, gardener, and parent in Indianapolis. And we also have with us Michelle Johnson, elementary education field experience coordinator, higher ed educator, a long track record of curriculum writing, coaching, understanding teacher education programs, certified trainer and facilitator in all education matters. I am so happy to have both of you here today because we have a complex topic, as we were just discussing before we started on, that I think needs to be made simple for people to understand, regular people. We had a previous show that we did, and we started talking about direct instruction. And one of the bold claims that I made about direct instruction, I think I made during that show, was it was one of the most studied and evidence-based practices in education history that was proven to help struggling students. It also, as it turns out, is something that's unpopular with many educators because they don't like to teach in the way many, I shouldn't say all, but many do not like to teach using direct instruction strategies. So I thought I would ask some people who know something about it to come on the show and let's talk about it. And I think during that last show, both of you chimed in, and I don't think both of you are here to say that you think it's amazing, awesome in all cases or whatever. I think you both wanted to chime in because you had some nuanced ideas about direct instruction. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you guys are not here to be like silver bullet. This is everything in all cases, right? This is more nuanced than that. So I'll be the one who says silver bullet. And the reason I'm going to say that, just to start us off, the reason that I'm going to say that is there are very few things that I've ever looked at where the science is so sound. Just for people listening, direct instruction is a method of teaching from, I want to say, the 1960s, 1970s. The federal government studied multiple ways of teaching that fell into three bucket areas. And those bucket areas dealt with, teaching basic skills in like one bucket, or letting children be really self-directed and let them explore education and figure things out for themselves. And a third that seemed kind of like somewhere in the middle of those two. And as it turns out, out of 9 different strategies for teaching that they researched, only direct instruction rose to the top as producing successful results in all categories. Like in all categories that they tested for. It was a big study. So it was in 1966. They looked at 328 studies involving 413 study designs and almost 4,000 different effects. It involved like 75,000 kids in almost 200 school districts across the country. Only direct instruction came out with positive scores across all 3 outcome areas: the basic skills, cognitive, and affective areas of learning. So that's my setup. Welcome, you guys, for being here after my long setup on this. So what say you? Why don't we start with how do you understand what direct instruction is, and how do you explain it to a person who's not steeped in education, science, or experience?
I would say, because a lot of times I have conversations, I have them with people who aren't educators. Number one, people I talk to with my parents. And so when I think about, if I'm talking to my parents, or I'm talking to my sisters, or I'm talking to cousins who are not educators, how do I say it to them to get them to get it? And so I explain it kind of like it's like modeling what you want someone else to do. Because I think sometimes we forget what teaching is I have a skill and I'm going to show you how to do this skill. That is what teaching is. And so direct instruction is saying, during this part of my class, I'm like explicitly, I'm focusing on teaching. I'm focusing on showing you how to do this skill, showing you how to write an essay, showing you how to create a simile, showing you how to do an introduction or a hook. I'm an English educator, so those are going to be my references. But that's what, when I try to break it down for people who are not educators, I say, I'm just modeling, I'm showing you how to do something.
when you go back to the 1960s and you talk that's the study, what is his name? Siegfried Engelmann. And his form of direct instruction, sometimes we'll say there's direct instruction big DI and direct instruction small DI. So with him, you're talking about a very scripted, sequence, systematic way of instruction. And teachers would actually, I mean, they literally had a script to read, do this next. When we talk about direct instruction now, we're bringing in that little DI, and I'm thinking about like, Barack Rosenstein and his principles of effective instruction. And there you will see yes, you have to model something first. Then you have to guide their practice. You have to check for understanding. You have to let them practice independently. So, I mean, that is part of instruction now. And I question when teachers say they don't like to teach this way. Is it because they don't like it, or they're not comfortable with it? They really don't know how. I mean, today we're placing problems in the center of math instruction, and we're using direct instruction around those problems to teach specific skills. We're placing text in the center of reading instruction, and then we're using direct instruction around that to teach skills.
You know, the story that I think started this conversation about direct instruction was, you know, I had a teacher in kindergarten for one of my children who had come from another school that was, it was, I want to say it was a little bit more socioeconomically on, more kids on FRL, on free and reduced lunch. And it definitely was more Black kids in the same school. And her comment to me about why she left that school and came to the school that we're at is because she didn't like teaching in the way that they taught there. Turns out it was direct instruction. And her exact quote was, I mean, it really does work for those kids. I just didn't want to do that. So basically she self-selected out of it, which I love. I love when a person says, you know, if this works, but I don't like it, I will leave. I won't stay and try and sabotage it. But she was literally basically saying I wanted to come to a school where I could teach kind of any way that I wanted and it wouldn't be a problem. You know, no scripts, no coach, no person telling you how to teach every day. Is there a rub between the professionalism of a teacher to be able to teach any kind of way that they want versus you needing to like keep everybody on the same page and keep things paced and keep people on task?
I think that's a hard question because so currently I'm an academic dean of at a charter school, and I supervise the English department, social studies department, and electives. And our English teachers, we use Wit and Wisdom curriculum, and it is scripted. And so one of the things I'm tasked with is making sure that everybody's like following the scope and sequence. But I also was an educator, an English teacher in a district where we had like, here's the curriculum, and you figure out how you're going to directly teach it. And like my lesson plans, I would have to say, and how am I going to model? How am I going to do guided practice? How are they going to do independent practice? What are my checks for understanding? How am I going to incorporate transferable knowledge, like them taking it from this and doing it somewhere else? And so both of those settings, we're doing direct instruction. Sometimes what educators are pushing back against is you telling me how to directly teach this. It's like I went to college or went to a program. I learned, like I'm a professional, so I should be able to show up and look at the curriculum and figure out how to directly teach. I don't need you giving me a script to teach. And I think what's hard for me, I'm at a school enforcing this and no, I couldn't probably teach under that because I'm like, I got skills, I got talent. Like I know how to teach this in a way. I don't want to use, and then the other problem I had is like the text they were using. Like this text is so white. Like I want to use a different text and apply these skills with this text. I always tell people, you're not teaching a novel, you're teaching the skills. And so for me, I know that's where I get conflicted as an educator because I feel like some teachers, they can't even teach with the script. So like they have a skill gap. So the script doesn't even help them. So there's layers of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. I took my daughter out of a school that was very, very scripted because They got a new curriculum, and it was all about curriculum fidelity. And in my opinion, when people say curriculum fidelity, it's that I have all of these tenured teachers. A bunch of them can't teach, so I can't get rid of them. So I'm going to bring in this curriculum, and we're going to have curriculum fidelity in our school, and then hopefully the kids will move forward. I moved my daughter to a more child-centered, student-centered, second grade through eighth grade experience, and she just graduated from Swarthmore now. So I think she did okay, but that didn't work for my other daughter, and it's not for my son. My son needs that regimented. He needs something totally different. So again, this is where school choice comes in. But I think we have a lot of teachers who, that skills gap is there, and the administrators want to figure out, okay, we can't get rid of these teachers. What are we going to do? But again, the direct instruction is, whether it's big DI or little DI, it's still there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you think is up, though, with the outsized results from DI when you look at it across a large number of students and teaching methods or whatnot, like these studies that they did? I get that it's not right for maybe every classroom, everybody, but the results are hard to argue with. It just the results are just outsized. I shouldn't even say very few. I've not seen a single other educational intervention that we find popular, that we like, that some people love or whatever, that has actually solid science behind it, like this one, that basically just says if you did this for all kids, your results would be outsized. You would get positive results across a lot of levels. I mean, what's up with that if it's not the way to go for every classroom, every teacher, every school?
I see direct instruct. I see teachers try to do it frequently. But again, it's the problems that I see is I don't know how to really model it myself well. So I'm struggling with it. I'm going to struggle with the kids during guided practice. I honestly don't think it has, I mean, we're doing it a lot now. And I think some teachers, like Shawnta said, there's that skill gap. There's that skill gap there. And then if they don't know how to do it, so instead of saying, I don't know how to do it, I need help, they say, I don't like to do it. So it hasn't gone anywhere. Now we're bringing a lot of knowledge back into the classroom, which I think is positive. We're actually teaching social studies and science again, or we're trying to. And I mean, and that's, I think we're going to see a big change once we really start doing that more often.
Shawnta, I wonder if you have a thought about the fact that maybe direct instruction in mass, in a way of getting people to be on the same page, script their instruction and how they do it, is a way to manage a large number of people and somewhat teacher-proof the classroom, like an effort to try and teacher-proof it, like based on the idea of, I think one of you said something about, we know we're not going to get rid of a bunch of people who can't teach. We know that we're going to have to just live with the workforce that we have. So honestly, to make it work, we're going to need to make sure that we do script a lot of it to teacher-proof the classroom. Is that where it comes from?
I mean, I think of my school. Like when the school year started this school year, I did not have a 5th grade English teacher. So I had to put someone else in that role that was in our building that's not a teacher and simply be like, follow this. And then we went through a whole bunch of subs and then we got a teacher. Now I'm working on next school year and I still don't have an 8th grade English teacher. And so when you're in that situation where you can't even find someone to do the job, you're like, I can't get rid of all these other people because then I'm going to be dealing with building subs. And so it's like, do I take someone that has some type of academic knowledge and try to work with them and kind of give them a foolproof plan? Or do I get rid of everybody that I know has skill gaps and then forget it? But The other thing I always push back on, some of the issue is you have people that are in like a role like my role that doesn't have the education or the tools to teach an adult to fill the skill gap. Because I will tell you, one of the most interesting things that was said to me when I got hired is like, you taught for a long time. Like it was, and that was like, because when I first started coaching teachers, I think I had taught for like 10 years. And my coach, my literacy coach that was coaching me when I was a literacy coach, had only taught for 2 years and spent most of her time asking me for advice. And so you get in situations where you have teachers with skill gaps, then you have leaders with skill gaps who can't fill the teacher skill gap. So you know what? We're just going to get a foolproof curriculum, just follow the script. And then they'll say stuff like, you know, wooden wisdom has proven data that if you just follow the script, kids will learn. But you have people who are, I sat with a teacher who's like, what's this hyperbole? I said, you mean hyperbole? Like they don't even know what the terms are in the script. And then you're trying to think they're going to follow the script and teach. So
wow.
Yeah.
The hype. What did you just say?
What is this hyperbole? And I'm like, you mean hyperbole?
Oh my God, that is terrible. That is terrible.
When you think about this, here's a chemistry teacher. She's a wonderful chemistry teacher, but they don't have a biology teacher in the school, or they need another biology teacher. So now this chemistry teacher who has the biology credential, now she's going to teach biology. She's going to teach a section of biology. So what does she do? Oh, she uses a more discovery approach with her biology class because she's not comfortable with doing a lab. And then once you do a lab, you actually, okay, I'm going to explain it to you. She's not comfortable with that piece, getting the kids to do the lab first, to really explore first, and then explain to them or help them explain or guide them through the process of the explanation of what they are seeing, because she forgot it herself. I'm not saying she doesn't know how to teach biology, but that knowledge is not fresh in her head. And I mean, think about, there are kids who have had, first grade is a sub, second grade is a sub, third grade, oh, okay, I have a teacher. Oh, and this is also my first year that they're going to be doing state assessment after they had these two subs that really didn't know too much what they were doing. And, they used more child-centered approaches because they did not have the skills to model and to really go through a strong direct instruction process. They hadn't read the book. Think about substitute teachers. They come in and, oh, we're reading this. How are they going to teach that? How are kids going to learn? So, I mean, these are the issues that districts or teachers, schools deal with all the time.
When you think about this, how do you confront the idea that some people just prefer what they call the child-centered approach? I know I've had experts who I've talked to during this broadcast who are more in favor of unstructured learning time. The idea that kids are naturally curious, that they will learn to read, for instance, because they're curious about reading. And if you allow them the space and you facilitate the room and the space, it'll come to them. They will, child-centered, child-driven, student-driven kind of learning is probably preferable to what people consider to be traditional. Like you just, tell kids what to do and when to do it and that sort of thing. I mean, do you have sympathy for the idea that if we just trust teachers and just allow the classroom to kind of flow the way that it does, kids are naturally curious, they'll learn on their own?
I think you could have both. Like sometimes I'm like, why is it an either or? Like I think about my sons who are in school, like I wouldn't put them in my school because I know they wouldn't thrive in that environment with a scripted learning. The school they're in, they have time during the day. I think they call it focus, where they get to explore and do what they want. So if they want to read about lizards, they can go to the section, get the literature book and read about lizards. But it's like time in the day where it's not really teacher driven, it's student driven. But then there's other parts of the day where it's like, okay, I actually went, because I always observe my kids' teachers. I show up randomly and sit, and I recommend every parent do that. I sat in one day and she taught about varying up the beginning of your sentences. She did a direct lesson on that. But then another part of the day was just like, we're going to sit here and explore. So to me, I feel like you can have both, and you can still, because I do feel like, I mean, they're children. Like I think about when I was in school, basically what we do now. Like there was a lot more play and a lot more interaction. So I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it should be the whole entire day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm work at a college, and I have students who have gone through Waldorf education. I have students who've gone through Montessori education. I have homeschooled students. I have students who went through some serious unschooling. I have students that went through democratic education programs. So now, when we talk about Black students going to some of these inner city district schools, that's a whole other discussion.
Mm-hmm.
There's little cultural affirmation in these schools. They have a lot of substitute teachers in these schools, a lot of teachers with skills gaps in these schools. So I mean, that's truly another discussion. I do believe kids can learn using these different approaches, and I see it in my students and the choices that their parents made for them. So
I think that's one of the things, though, that's a rub with direct instruction, is that who is it for? The studies that started it were really about kids that were behind, that were going to be struggling, specifically urban kids in urban school systems, and they were testing what philosophies might work best for them. Now, I know you mentioned like Waldorf. I think typically you find that that's an upper middle class educational program, and that maybe, I mean, I'm guessing here, many kids don't come to Waldorf education behind 3 grades, so, I'm wondering if you have a thought around direct instruction probably is more necessary if you're trying to accelerate because you're behind, versus everybody's equal. We're all on task already. Now you can choose between Montessori and Waldorf. I mean, is there something to, if you're behind, maybe you need something that's more direct, something more explicit in terms of how people teach?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think about my sons. They showed up to school reading. So they didn't need everything that the teacher was doing because they came up with that skill. And if you have kids that come, I sat on a panel in a meeting for my school district about the achievement gap, because the school district my kids go to, we have the largest Black-white achievement gap in Indianapolis. So I was brought in with like the Indo ACP, some other groups, and they said they only felt like 17 or 18% of Black kids came to school prepared. So when you think about the rest of those kids that are not my kids, that are in like the minority of the Black kids that come to school, they need something direct. They can't sit there and play with blocks all day and explore. Like they need the teacher to sit them down and say, hey, you have got to leave here knowing your letters. You have to leave here knowing how to write your name and count to 100, do some basic math skills. Like they can't play all day because you're just setting them up for failure. And the other thing I noticed in school, when the standardized testing starts, a lot of times we have teachers with skill gaps. Oh, we're going to kick them down to K2 because we don't want them in the testing grades. And I think that's the worst thing you can do in the school. You're going to put the teachers who have skill gaps at the K2 level, and then those kids don't learn anything, and then they show up to 3rd grade, and then they fail the test, and you keep banging your head against the wall like, well, why is this happening? And I see it time and time again where teachers get shifted down to K2 because we don't need to worry about that. That's why you have, like, my kids are in 3rd grade. They missed the iRead test, which is the reading test, because of the pandemic. But they're like, yeah, Mom, we did this packet today. So they're doing packets to get catch up on the skill gap that other kids may have, because some of these kids missed it K-2 because they had a teacher that was just letting the kids explore and not sitting them down and filling in those gaps.
So 2 things. Number 1, I just want to tell you guys, when I become education czar of the world and I get to change everything, the very first executive order I'm going to pass is against worksheets and worksheet packets, at least the ones that come home. I don't want to see another worksheet or packet come from home, because that is, like, I think, torture for everybody. It's just straight up child abuse. It's parent abuse is what it is. And especially when you get too many of them coming home at the same time, you got multiple kids. But I'm trying to understand what you just said. So you're a teacher in testing grades. We have discovered that you don't have all the skills that you need. So we send you further upstream to work in like kindergarten, second grade, first grade, in the grades where you're preparing children for the first testing grade. That's what we do. That's the strategy. Wow.
I've seen it. Like that's what people do. And I'm like that. And it's always my frustration of, instead of fixing the problem or addressing the problem, we're just going to put a Band-Aid on it. And I feel like you're not addressing it, but it goes back to like, well, I'm not going to fire all these teachers, so I'm just going to shuffle them around. Which is
people say we can't fire our way to success, is what people say all the time. My good friend Linnell Michelson likes to say, well, we've never really tried. We maybe should try to fire our way to some success if you have that many people teaching who it can't really teach. I'm still having trouble, though, understanding the difference between the teacher, I don't know in number what percentage, but the teachers that are ready to teach, that do know, if you give them just a frame, they can take it and run with it, and they know what to do with it, versus the ones that really do need for you to hand them something like prepackaged, ready to go, that, because I think that's where the real rub is. If you're an educator who feels talented, you're going to feel like you're stealing my professionalism by making me do this. If you're a teacher who's not talented, you're still going to feel like you're stealing away from my professionalism. Like no teacher is going to stand up and say, I have a skills gap, I'm not very good. Right.
But I think it's up to us to tell them you have a skills gap. But we can work with that. Again, this goes back to I talk about the difference between an A teacher and a C teacher. To understand that I'm going to accept that I have this gap, and then I want to fix it. I mean, I could see that teacher when Shawnta said, hyperbole? You mean hyperbole? Did that teacher get an attitude back at you? Like,
I mean, she just went like this. And I mean, this was totally, it was a figurative language. And so I said, do you know the difference between simile and metaphor? I just kept going because I'm like, if you're not even getting what this is. So I went through the things and went over the stuff with her. But I'm like, man, but it also takes like that time, because when I think about my school, I'm in all of the teachers I supervise, I'm in their classrooms every single week. I give them feedback that's emailed to them immediately afterwards. And then I meet with them once a week to debrief their feedback, and then I coach them. And so some of the things I do, which I will tell you, I've had teachers say, this is demeaning. I say, well, let's get up and practice this. So how would you actually teach this skill to a student? And I pretend to be a student. And some teachers, they hate it because I'm like, but I watch you like fail at doing this. So what else do you want me to do? Because I can't continue to watch you fail to teach this. I need to help you practice teaching it. And it goes back, because I was listening to Jay yesterday. He talked about how a lot of teachers did not have a good student teaching experience. So they show up, they had an opportunity to quote unquote practice, but the practice wasn't really good. And so they show up to your school and you just ignore them. But then you have a whole other issue with veteran teachers that have been skating by for years and years and years and can't teach. And those are the teachers that are the hardest to change, because they'll say things like, well, I got brought back. I mean, I've been here 10 years, and so they're like out of touch with reality. I'm like, you're only here because they didn't do the work to fire you. They didn't make you uncomfortable. Like, you got to make some teachers uncomfortable, because some teachers will self-select out when it's like, oh, you're not doing this. I need to go to so-and-so's classroom and watch them do it. Oh, I'm going to come in and teach a lesson. Like, you start making them uncomfortable. It's like, you either going to get on the boat and improve your skills, or these are the things that are going to happen. They sometimes will self-select out, but sometimes we don't want to do that work and have those hard conversations with teachers and make them uncomfortable and make them look at themselves in the mirror and be like, you can't teach this.
I mean, I see a problem with what you said earlier, though. If you have that person who can't teach, has a skills gap, and instead of dealing with it, you push them down to lower grades. Here's what I think is the result of that. The thing that I think is the result of that is that now you have children who are being miseducated at an earlier grade. They're going to do poorer on the tests in the first testing grades. And then we're going to blame the student, the parent, the poverty, their home life, their culture, hip hop, the gunshots in their neighborhood, the fact that they're hungry and you need to give them, granola bars from your desk and all that type of stuff. And no one's ever going to say, hey, but wait a second, how come you gave them teachers that had skills gaps in the grades before testing. The problem with that to me is if you're one of those teachers, you never really do have to confront the fact that it's you, that you do have an issue, you do have a problem. And then, as a matter of fact, you might have a big part of your profession that's full of people who are walking around with false confidence in themselves and their ability to teach. And while they have that, we are still blaming kids and families and culture as the problem. I'm not saying that culture and all those things don't have a role to play. Family, culture, all those things have a role to play. But I don't think as educators, you can start talking about that until you've fixed your own house, until you've cleaned up your own system. Then it doesn't sound, from what you guys are saying to me, it's even more horrifying. Like their hyperbole is probably the most terrifying thing I'm going to hear this week. It literally is. Like, that's worse than, like, you know, Friday the 13th to me. Like, that is, and if I were to say how big is a problem like that, like, you know, how widespread is a problem with that, I'm afraid to know the answer.
Well, okay. So we're 10 years, we're a little over 10 years with the Common Core.
Mm-hmm.
So Common Core, again, I'm not a fan of it. So I will put that out there.
Mm-hmm.
But it did uncover a lot of what teachers don't know. But okay, 10 years. So 10 years ago, we focused on English, language arts, and math.
Mm-hmm.
And for the past 10 years, content and you know, knowing literary devices is part of content. You know, content has kind of gone out the door. Science and social studies has kind of gone out the door because we've been so focused on these kids passing this test and focusing on these skills and not necessarily thinking about knowledge. Okay, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Think of some of these new teachers out here who have gone through their whole schooling and they really haven't focused on, you know, content and knowledge and knowing things. And now they have to teach. And we're finding out, you know, you really don't know a lot. Yes, they worked on your skills and you did well and you passed all your tests. But we don't do a lot of content professional development in our profession. We take for granted that these teachers have the content and have it down. And another thing, in Maryland. So in Maryland, with teacher certification under the redesign of education many years ago, what they had people like me and teacher education programs do, they wanted to place cohorts of student teachers in buildings with the goal of changing the building and changing things in the school.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened then is you didn't necessarily have student teachers being placed with the strongest teachers, those teachers who could really truly model direct instruction and model it well, those teachers who could show them how to, you know, we're going to start with a task or a problem and we're going to get the kids to grapple with it, and then we're going to move into direct instruction to bolster skills. You didn't get student teachers with the teacher that knew the novel, that was well read. And so they really didn't get the model, because if you think about student teachers need direct instruction also. They they need to see a strong model, and then they need someone to help guide them through practicing, and then they need to do it on their own. I mean, that's what we do. They need to have someone check for understanding and give them feedback. So it's you know, things have been tumbling, and here we are. And who does it impact the most? Kids in inner cities, in rural areas, who need that true professional. need that person.
The thing that frustrates me with these conversations, and the more that I engage in them, is that the fact that the American mediocre teacher is more powerful than any person in education. So the American mediocre teacher and less than mediocre teacher actually literally has more collective power than almost anybody in education. So you mentioned the state standards. When you start to try and do things like assess, measure, have standards, create responsibilities, accountabilities, or whatnot, the American mediocre teacher, the one white woman, and her people of color who want to be just like her in education actually have more collective power to make sure that they can sabotage almost any scheme, no matter how commonsensical, right? No matter whether or not you need standards, you need some sort of goals, you need to define what learning should be. And there's always going to be people who can't reach what you define. So then they're going to use their collective political power to sabotage the implementation of the thing that you're trying to define as the standard. When we had state standards battle here in Minnesota, it was just weird. It ended up with really just a weird mishmash of incoherent standards because so many people got involved. Really what I saw as the problem was there were so many people that just didn't want a goal. They didn't want to be measured for anything. They didn't want to be told that they weren't measuring up ever. That might sound like, going too far with a critique, but I do believe that you try and set standards, they get argued about for forever, they get implemented, and then people spend all of their time and effort saying No Child Left Behind didn't work. Testing doesn't work. Measurement doesn't work. Evaluation doesn't work. There's no instrument that ever could measure real good teaching. It's an art. It's not a science. So you eventually end up with, there never will be a standard that you'll agree with, will there? There never will be an evaluation, a method, a tool of saying whether or not you measure up. That seems like the real battle, the real fight. Would you guys disagree with that?
We've always had standards. I mean, there's standards for all the content areas. I mean, it really didn't hit me until, I thought about, I put my kid in a school where they didn't, I think she had maybe one standardized test. And then she needed to prepare for the secondary education test. I mean, but they were assessing and they were reflecting and they were improving their instruction all along. So, I mean, those things for teachers who could teach, I mean, they're not afraid of that and they do it. It's this whole idea of we're going to have this set of standards that we use to tell teachers that they don't know how to teach and tell schools that they have achievement gaps. And that's what the Common Core and just the whole testing situation did. I already know that this kid is 3 years behind. So I am going to give him the type of education to try to force this test at a 7th grade level when I already know he's reading at the 2nd grade level. That's wrong for the kid. I mean, it's what we've done to it is we've used testing as the boogeyman, and we haven't done what we really need to do, and that is improve the skills of these teachers. Tell these teachers that they can't teach. Take them behind closed doors and help them learn how to teach, or get rid of them if they're not willing to do the work that it takes.
But you can't really get rid of them.
Yes,
really.
You can.
Yes, you can.
Oh, yes, you can.
Really hard.
But she's right about using tests as the boogeyman, because when school closed in Indianapolis, one of my sons, they read, well, the last time they were tested at school, they said they read at the beginning of the school year, they said they read at a 5th grade level, and they are in 3rd grade. That was the beginning of 3rd grade. So there's no reason they shouldn't even be worried about the I Read 3 test. But when school closed, my one son, in his assignment notebook, he had written down the test was coming, had circled the date in his assignment notebook, like on the day it was happening. And he says, well, how am I going to go to 4th grade? I didn't take that test. because he had heard at school that if I don't pass this test, I do not go to 4th grade. And I was sitting here, why is my kid who showed up to kindergarten and preschool reading, why are you afraid and scared and have anxiety? And then I said, well, you need to worry about that. And he looked at me, he's like, how do you know? You don't teach 3rd grade. And first I was like, listen, just your tone. And then I'm like, I'm an educator telling my child you don't need to worry, and he doesn't even believe me. And so that's the thing that bothers me, is like, even kids who are okay, they are afraid of the test and they're getting stress and anxiety. And instead, the stress and anxiety should be on that teacher. Like, how are we helping that teacher get better? Now, I do agree, you can't fire those teachers. Just sometimes principals don't want to do the work. I had a principal when I was a coach who literally didn't come into classrooms. Like, she would watch teachers and watch things on a video camera and then like write teachers up for doing, like, she wrote up some teacher for going across the street during prep because she had mandated you couldn't leave during your prep. I'm like, what type of principal are you? Like, this is not the answer. You should be in classroom. But then again, I'm like, when a principal is hiding in their office, it makes me think that you don't have the skills to do it. And I received no coaching from our principal when I was a coach. So I'm just going, and even myself, like, I feel like I need to learn. I'm teaching myself and reading books and asking, can I go to this training? Because I know the longer I'm out of the classroom and I'm not teaching every day, my skills could start eroding. So I need to be making sure I'm keeping myself knowledgeable when I'm teaching teachers. And I will say one more thing about the scripted curriculum. Sometimes we think because we give a teacher a script and the company comes in and gives PD using that script, that the teacher are going to be okay. One of the things I did was Wooden Wisdom. I did professional development about how to have academic conversations and how to use Kagan strategies. And my teachers were like, we really appreciated that because, like, I followed the script, but it's not working and I need something else. And so a lot of times we fail to give teachers tools on how to teach the content, even if they have a script. And so there's more responsibility on leaders and people who coach and who supervise teachers to be really knowledgeable themselves. Because if I'm struggling, I'm reaching out to you, administrator, and then administrator is not giving you an answer. They're just going to continue to struggle, and the kids are failing. So that admin is failing the teacher, and then the teacher fails the kid.
I mean, what happened in their preparation, though, that they end up in a classroom fully done with their training, their college training and everything, and they still need that much. Like, it's on the district to provide, it feels like, what higher ed should have been providing them before they got there. Is that wrong?
I'm a big advocate of residency programs. Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, in true residency programs, not putting the teacher in the classroom by themselves and having the teacher across the hall mentor them. I'm talking about you are working in a classroom with a master teacher, with someone who knows how to break instruction down, mm-hmm. or break content down into instructional sequences for at least a 2-year period before you let them loose on their own with students. So I'm a big advocate for residency programs because as a teacher educator, I'm all about the content. If one of my students came to me with a lesson plan and I don't see an anticipated student response, like, okay, where's the answer key? Where are, teachers have working memory too. And so I want your working memory to be clear so that you can focus on other things. So give me a plan. If you write a question in your lesson plan, what answer are you looking for the students to give? You need to be planned at that level. So that's what I can do as someone who is not in the classroom with the student. They need to be in that classroom with that master teacher, observing. They need to be practicing, and they need to not feel that they're the teacher in charge. And I think we do that a little too much. And we're doing it with our neediest kids. I mean, that's what bothers me the most.
That's the part that, bothers me the most. And it makes it really hard to trust educators, education systems, education leaders, education as a $700 billion enterprise in the United States, as a system. when we're in 2020, right, at this time, we're still talking about the need for maybe something so basic as a residency period, or, we don't just unleash teachers on the most struggling students, who the teachers themselves are actually some of the most struggling teachers too. We're still talking about that in 2020. The education establishment in 150 years, with all of this money, resources, systems, fancy people with fancy degrees, and all kinds of stuff going on, I still can't put my kid in a school system and expect that they have figured out some of the most basic and mundane research-based ways of approaching this work. I can't figure out why, like, you can say something like, it just makes obvious common sense that we should have residency, right? That's a part of the process, and it not be there, right? Like why is that a thing still? Why is that not there? I mean, it's expensive to become a teacher. It's expensive to be educated. It's expensive to educate them, and then it's expensive for school districts to re-educate them when they didn't show up. That costs money. Like, that's like, my school district is going to pay money for the remedial. Is that the wrong way to consider it? I'm considering it almost like remedial education of a teacher. Like, yeah, you went to 4 years of college and then you did your certification, you did all that. Now we have you, and we have to spend more money on getting you ready for classroom teaching, which costs money.
I mean, it's how are you going to spend that money? You could spend that money putting 2 teachers in a classroom, a resident teacher, a new teacher in a classroom with a veteran teacher. So spend that money up front, so you don't have to spend that money remediating, if you want to remediate, if they want to do the work. Because if they don't want to do the work, you just get rid of them. That's what we need. We need a system where we make that easy. But so you're going to spend the money anyway. It's, do you want to spend the money? Because this whole thing about student teaching drives me up the wall, in that in Maryland, you have to spend two semesters student teaching. So 2 semesters. So you can have a student teacher for pretty much almost your whole academic year. And that student teacher is paying.
That's so ridiculous. That is so ridiculous. Yeah.
Ridiculous. That once you finish the theory piece, and we see that you have the professional attributes, you have the content, and you go into the classroom, you should have a 2, maybe 3-year period of working with a master teacher and getting paid to like doctors, like an internship and a residency in a hospital. So we do need to fix that system. But the way schools are funded, I mean, think about the way schools are funded. Our district county commissioners would not want to pay for that. They wouldn't want to. What do you mean? They graduated from college, put them in the classroom, give them their classroom. You don't need 2 teachers in that classroom. I'm not saying pay them as much, but they need to be paid, and they need some benefits. And I think strong residency programs that really provide that coach, that mentor teacher that you're working with are the way to go.
What do you do about veteran teachers that have been around a long time who think they're better than they actually are?
That's really tough. My first year coaching, I had a teacher that looked at me and said, well, I'm old enough to be your mother. What you going to tell me, baby girl? And I'm just like,
wow.
Okay. And this is my first year coaching teacher. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a long year. That's all I said in my head. Cause I'm like, what is this? And every time I would say something to this teacher, it was always pushback. Well, I've been teaching for 3 decades. I know what I'm doing. It's just the same wheel. Like, she had, every time I said something, she just had an answer for this, an answer for that, an answer for everything. And it got to the point, real talk, that the principal was just like, we're just going to wear her out to retirement. And like, that's like the most frustrating thing when I've got documentation. Like, I asked the teacher to do this. The teacher refused to do this. But the teacher already knows, like, you're not going to get rid of me. You know how hard it's going to be to get rid of me? I've been teaching this grade for 3 decades. It's going to be hard. So I don't even have an answer to that, but I will say that people always say it's the union, they're going to stop. And I've been in charter and traditional public, mostly traditional public for most of my career. But I've seen bad teachers get fired, but I also see principals that do the work to make that happen, because a teacher improvement plan is supposed to do two things. One is supposed to help you to improve so you stay, because we already invested in you. But the second part of that plan, if you don't get on board, you're going to be out the door. And some principals just don't have the stomach for that. They don't have the stomach. I actually interviewed the principal of my son's school, and the principal of my son's school was a teacher at her school, the assistant principal of the school, and now the principal. And she said one of the hardest things I had to do was coach someone out of my school that I taught with at this school. Mm-hmm. But when she told me that, I felt good on the inside, because I'm like, that would have been a hard thing to do, to be somebody's colleague, and now you're over them, and then you have to help them out the door. But I'm like, but that's the type of leaders we need in these schools, that are going to have the stomach, they're going to have the willpower to be like, if you're not here for these kids, and you can't be at this school.
Mm-hmm. Well, anecdotally speaking, well, first of all, common sense wise, that makes sense to me. Like, if you don't use the rules that help you coach somebody out or coach them back in, then it's on you. If you're the leader and you haven't set the pace for your entire team, where everybody kind of marches, to a similar speed and whatnot, that's on you. You're the leader. Real talk, though, with some leaders, anecdotally speaking, will tell you, first of all, if you have one teacher or two teachers that have that issue in your building, that's a job in itself. But if you have more than one or two, now you're a full-time kind of disciplinarian of a couple of teachers, and you're not a full-time principal for the rest of your school and for every student. So just a few teachers who need that much work and documentation can put a building leader into under capacity for what they should be doing, like for all students and for the entire thing, right? So you might need some assistance from central office, or from, if you end up with 3 or 4 teachers, and God forbid, like 4 or 5 teachers, 5, 6 teachers in your building where you're one of those principals, you're going to need district support to stay on top of how you coached him. The other thing is, we don't talk often all the time about race. I don't know what's like in your school districts, but I can lead you to a principal who had an all-white teaching staff, and he did the hard work of getting a couple of them out, and they were very good friends with the rest of the staff, and they knew each other, and they had weekend parties together, and blah, 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 blah. So they basically had an insurrection, and they made it about him, and the union got involved, and suddenly this very well trained, award-winning principal, black male principal and educator became the problem, because he did the hard work of getting a few teachers out that needed to get out. I think sometimes principals have to be political too about who they let go and who they don't let go.
Yeah, education is political. And like I tell people, like, the higher up you go up the chain in education, you find out that you're involved in politics. You find out that you have to, quote unquote, choose your battle. When I was talking to my principals, like, we're going to just wait her out to retirement, but we can go for this teacher, because that other teacher, she got all the friends in the union. They will come for us. So let's go, like, which one can we essentially target? So at that same school with the teacher that said the hyperbole, I will tell you, so you have to leverage to other people in your school. So I produced the documentation of, like, this teacher's not proficient. These are the things I'm doing with the teacher. The teacher is still not closing the skill gap. My principal was able to use that, and that teacher did not return the next school year. So you can't. It's horrible to say, like, we couldn't get them all out, but you also will be in a situation where the leader gets persecuted, and it's like, oh, well, now you got teacher turnover. You're just firing everybody. You're not a good leader. But it's like, no, the leader before me and the leader before that person didn't do the work, because a lot of times when you get to school, you inherit teachers that have been there for a while. So now you're dealing with, I'm trying to fire this teacher that's been here through 3 principals. So if the other 3 principals didn't fire them, why are you trying to fire them? So that's like the politics that administrators deal with. And then I just say leverage other people, because you're right. If you have 5, 6, 7 teachers that are insufficient, you have to leverage that coach to do a lot of that's what I did. I would keep the documentation on, this is their plan. These are the tools we try to use. Okay, this is the day they refused to do this. I asked them to do this. I asked them to go do this. They didn't do that. And so the principal didn't have to do all the legwork. So
Vicky Watts asked, how can we as parents advocate for coaching teachers in our school, especially if teacher in need has been identified? Toya has a one-word answer to some of this that says data. So, and I don't know if that means like you do your documentation, you keep track, you follow, and you help people themselves see the picture with data, though, not with subjective things. Michelle Newell asked, how is that good for kids in that with that teacher in the class? And we're talking about the teacher, I believe she's talking about the teacher who you said, we're just going to wait her out till retirement. And I kind of had the same question. We're going to wait her out until retirement. What happens to the kids that she comes in contact with until retirement, right? And then, I mean, how's that an answer for the kids? I get it for the process, but for the kids, man, that sounds terrible. You know what I say? Like, we have a school, I'm not going to name it because I do this all the time with this particular school and people get mad at me, but we have a school that was on the front page of newspaper here as having all the lowest rated teachers in the district in one school. And they had suspiciously just all made it to this one school. And this, every district has that school where it's not powerful politically because it doesn't have all the right zoning and it doesn't have all the right PTA stuff and whatever. And administrators can ignore it because it's not necessarily situated right in a neighborhood that has a lot of kind of like affection for the school or whatever. So that's how you end up with teachers kind of migrating to this one school. But that also was the school that had the most struggling kids in the district. And I just thought there was something criminal about that. I felt like that was like criminal intent. You knew that you were transferring some of the lowest skilled teachers into a building with some of the most struggling students. I can't think of a clearer example of institutional racism than that. But the truth is you had to put those teachers somewhere. And at the Ritzy or Tonier schools, they just have a clever way of making sure that they don't have any of those teachers in their building. I don't know how it happens. It's like magic. Like in some of the better performing parts of the district, like the moment that a mortgage gets to about $750,000 to $1 million, all of a sudden it's magic. Those teachers are in those schools, and it's just weird. I don't know how it happens. Y'all understand? Can you explain to me the magic of how that happens? Is it voodoo? What is it? Tell me how that happens.
It's racism. I mean, it's straight up. It's straight. I mean, it is classic. I like working with pre-service teachers in a private program where we don't even stamp the transcript if you get below a B-. If you get and I truly believe an A means above and beyond, a B means beyond, a C means average, mediocre, bare minimum. You can't be average, mediocre, bare minimum. And we spar with a bunch of parents. Like, no, we're not stamping the transcript. Your child is not ready to be in a classroom, because I know deep in my heart that those are the kids that end up in Baltimore City. Those are the principals that don't call me for a recommendation. Because if they called me for a recommendation, I would have to tell them the truth. And it's racist and it's criminal. That we put, and then we use the test as a boogeyman to say that, oh, Black children can't learn. Well, they can learn, and they can learn at high levels. Mm-hmm. If we put them in situations where they can learn, and they can learn at high levels. But they use those test scores to control it. It's part of everything about that society is trying to control Black bodies. It drives me batty.
You think the test scores are a way in which I'm not understanding that part about the test scores. How do test scores figure?
Okay, first of all, we have always had standards. We had standards before the Common Core. People weren't paying attention to the...
We didn't have common standards, though.
You know what? We could have used those. We could have used those standards.
Well, I mean, the problem was that you had standards in Kentucky, Minnesota, and Massachusetts that were so far different that they lived on different planets. So to be proficient in Kentucky and Mississippi meant one thing. To be proficient in Massachusetts and Minnesota was another thing. And so we had standards. We always did. And they changed pretty regular. Oftentimes they changed with the governor. who came in, and a new commissioner of education and whatnot. Often, like Minnesota went through multiple versions of standards, like schemes of what the standards would be, so much to where teachers, if you had been teaching for 3 decades, you were able to see them come and go like multiple times. There was nothing, no line in the sand. Like, this is what it means in Minnesota to be an effective reader, math, science person, whatever, you know. So we didn't have common standards. Yeah, there were always worse standards, but it was easy to game the system if you were, for instance, in a state like West Virginia, where you knew for a fact that you were going to have an inferior school system. So you just lowered the standards to meet the fact that you knew. So you had people graduating with F work, but were getting A's in one state, which in another state like Massachusetts, you would have been failing all along, right?
We still have that. I honestly thought that in AP, the NAEP was enough, because now you have teachers that their knowledge. You go to these private schools. When I see what private schools are able to do, or what small independent Black schools are able to do. In fact, when I first did my my master's degree, I got to observe this amazing Islamic school. When I see what they are able to do, and they're using national standards. They're looking at them, but they're also using what they know children need to be up here when they move on, and what they need to have a good emotional quotient to live in this society and excel in this society. That's there. When I look at what the Common Core did, expose bad teaching nationally. I will say that. I will say that it exposed a lot of things that people could sweep under the rug, but we're not working on fixing it. All we do is talk about it. We're not finding solutions, which a type of public choice could fix. But that's a different.
Well, it's not. You're never going to fight me on school choice. I'm with you. Like, I actually honestly believe that we can solve all these arguments. I don't have to agree with your stance. You don't have to agree with mine if we all have a choice. Like, if I have an option to put my kid, I always make the joke about, if I want to choose a school where the kids, roll around eating paste all day, then, let me have that school, because another parent is going to want there to be a structured environment with some real measurements to understand how tests work and all that. And another parent's not going to want those things. So choice for me makes a lot of difference. But I'm still stuck on this thing around, standards or a measurement or a bar to hit that's common to everybody, so folks don't game the system, to me doesn't seem to be the problem. The problem always seems to be what people do with the information after that, right? So like, having a standard doesn't make you do anything except for tell you, imagine if Kentucky, Minnesota, and Massachusetts had different blood pressure tests, right? So we were telling people wildly different things about the normative range on blood pressure. You would have some states where some people were going to die more than others. You would have some states where people were going to have hypertension and not know it. And then you would have doctors who would say, well, we know Black people have higher hypertension. Why do we need a test to tell us that they have higher hypertension? We know that their babies, they have a greater incidence of low birth weight. We know that they have, like, all these things that we test for that give us kind of a dashboard of how we're doing. It's not like they surprise us. Like, we didn't know that black people have hypertension or sickle cell or these things. But my problem, you mentioned NAEP. I guess this is a fine point for me, is NAEP is a sample. It tells you generally something that's going on, but it doesn't tell you specifically. It doesn't tell me I have hypertension. It tells me someone in my family has hypertension somewhere, right? So I never understand, like, why specific tests that have and specific standards for specific students find so much resistance.
But why didn't we use the National Council for Teacher of Mathematics Standards? Why didn't we use, we have all of these sets of standards that are out, that we could be using.
Well, I do know that those made it into the Common Core, because one of the mathematics leads on the Common Core math was someone from that association, and they actually took them over. Now, what you're going to find with associations like that is they've already studied it, they already know it, and then when they start integrating with teachers who haven't studied and haven't known it, and experts and others, and they sit at a table, all of a sudden they're talking to non-experts who want you to water this part down or change this part or whatnot, and it becomes a negotiation process.
Raise it up. It's when I look at how my child's school, how they use the content standards in each area to help guide what they were doing with the students. And when I look at some of the other programs that college students have come out of, that's what they use to guide. But they had knowledgeable adults who were content focused and who knew pedagogy, whether it was child-centered or direct, to guide them in their education. I mean, and that is the big thing that we need. Content-focused, knowledgeable educators, not those. We still have a those who can't teach mentality in the United States of America, and not those who can teach mentality. And that's what we need to get rid of.
I love it. Tanae Hamilton says Common Core just made the standards common. The mandate for excellent accountable teaching is not common, which I think kind of strikes at a lot of what we've been talking about in this program, which is if you're not gonna have an accountable profession, you can have a lot of things put in place. But I mean, if you don't have the coaching, the support, the training, the accountability or whatnot, everything else that you put into place is kind of for naught. I do want to end as we wrap on this idea around direct instruction. I oversold it in the hype for this discussion. What is the one thing in history proven to work for everybody, all kids, direct instruction? And I stick by the fact that the science basically says that the biggest body of science says that this intervention of all interventions studied has the biggest outsized results, especially for struggling kids. But I think we've talked about a lot of nuances in this conversation. How would you guys, in wrapping, say that you would reconcile the nuances with the science so that people have a more level-headed idea about direct instruction?
I would go back to whoever made the comment about go back to the data, because when I have conversations with teachers, because some part of your job as a coach, you're trying to convince them to see your viewpoint, and so they're resistant. So I would go back to because when you're a coach or administrator, you're rated by producing results, and so one of the things that I have to be able to show is that I am getting change through these teachers. And so I would say, look at your data. Like when we did this is what your results were. When you were doing this is what your results are. So we really need to stick with this direct instruction. We really need to stick with explicitly teaching some of these skills to our students, because this is what shows that our students are growing, that they're moving, and they're gaining outcomes in the right direction. And so that's what I use to sell, because I'm not satisfied if I can't help a teacher get better, because then I'm not doing my job. And for me, I have to have the skill set to help you learn and close all your gaps, so then you can go and teach a kid that skill. So that's kind of my thoughts about that.
Direct instruction is natural. This whole idea of modeling, of guiding practice, of checking for understanding, of independent practice, breaking things down into small units to teach. I mean, that's not going anywhere. But my thing is, we need a knowledgeable, a content-focused, someone who knows some cognitive science. So we need that knowledgeable person who can model it. We need to make sure we have that before we start talking about direct instruction and how it's not going to work if you don't have someone who knows what they're doing.
And I think we'll leave it there. I appreciate both of you coming on the show today. challenging me and letting me challenge from a civilian perspective the real knowledge base that you guys hold and the expertise that you hold. Also, just from me to you, thank you for the work that you do and for being dedicated to the thing that I honestly believe is the most important thing that I think I can be an activist for, and that's the education of 8 million Black children. I had to make my mission really simple when I decided to become an advocate, an activist, whatever you want to call me. You need a simple mission statement. And if you think about 8 million Black children walking into schools every day that aren't prepared for them and won't help them meet their highest potential, that is my goal. That is my focus, to turn that around. And the people who make it happen are folks like you. Because the moment that you have a goal of wanting to fix something to help all those kids, you have to look and ask yourself, okay, who are the experts who know something about this? And then you have to champion them. You have to like put them on platforms and say, tell us like what we should know about these things. And that's you. So that's the two of you and others like you and all the ones that you help. So I hope you go to bed at night thinking to yourself, damn, I'm kind of like a revolutionary. I'm kind of like saving the world. So I appreciate you, Shawnta Barnes, academic dean and longtime educator, I believe a librarian also, and an active gardener and writer, and Dr. Michelle Johnson, higher ed.
Yet, Chris.
Dr. What is it? What is it? How close are we?
2022. I should be.
So pre-Dr. Michelle Johnson, future Dr. Michelle Johnson, long-term, I think, expertise in curriculum development, working with coaching and understanding everything we talked about today, supporting teachers, understanding how curriculum works, understanding how pedagogical interventions are probably something we spend too little time thinking about. So I appreciate both of you. Thank you so much. For the folks listening and commenting, I thank you too, because every day you guys come here, you leave comments. They're amazing comments. I learn more. As I say every day, I read every single one of your comments afterwards to see if there's anything I can use for future shows. So if you have ideas, please send them to me or put them in the comments. Thank everybody for watching, and thank you to my two guests.